So we are doing legally and ethically this week, and we are going to be going through it. So before I going to go into the subject, I'm going to just do a little bit of a, what's it called, brain tease. So we're all going to just share two truths and a lie about ourselves, okay? So I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up. So I'll go first, and then you have to guess. So we'll all go, and then we'll give ourselves a chance to think about it, and then we'll respond to say which one was the truth and which one was, so two truths. So just which one was the lie, basically, at the end. So you all have to think about something like that. You got it? Is that going to be a bit of a challenge?
Start over there.
Okay. Okay, Andre, you go.
All right, I've eaten camel meat, bat meat, and crocodile meat.
Bat meat.
The bat. Camel. You get rid
Oh,
the bat.
sorry, you're saying which one is the lie?
The bat's a lie.
The bat's a lie.
I think so too.
Everybody made a
Yeah, the bat's a lie.
crocodile's a lie.
Wow.
It's actually it's a delicacy on the island.
Yeah, wow, that's quite hectic. Have you got one?
I haven't eaten it, but I know someone who has. And they don't know that.
So I just want to share with my online students, because I've got it on the online students today. So Andre just shared that he's eaten crocodile meat, bat meat, and camel meat, and we all thought that it was the bat, but he said it was the crocodile. Interesting. Okay, next to go.
I have a pet koala. I have 5 dogs. Or I'm a homeowner.
Okay.
The koala's a lie.
Homeowner? No, only because it took ages. So we're both
So
wrong.
the 5 dogs.
5 dogs.
5 dogs as well. Oh, wow. Okay. So
I was thinking maybe it's 4, 6, 7
Wow.
dogs. I won't say anything because I'll probably like, sorry.
5 dogs, a pet koala, or a homeowner. Well, homeowner at 17. Really?
Yes.
Wow.
You go, girl.
That is crazy.
Anyway,
So you haven't got 5 dogs though. Are you working on that?
Is like,
That's your aim. How many dogs have you got?
3.
Okay, that's good going.
Well, too young to own a home. Yeah.
What other pets do you
My hat
have?
off there.
I think I got 6 horses, a lot of cows, the koala, a bird, and a cat. So far.
Wow, crazy. At 17. Yo, when did you start?
17 years ago.
All right, next up. Who's next?
Okay, because you know a lot about Marie, sort of. I'm trying to think. My life's so boring. I don't know.
Well, that's a lie.
No, it is. Like every day's the same. Okay. I love raw capsicum. I used to be a chef. No, that's okay. I've got to change it. I can't think of 2 truths to tell you. Like,
Oh, you're telling us already.
I know. I can't think of any truths though. There are 2 lie ones, but I don't know any. Like, because you already know most of it. You know, I've got a son. You know, I'm a single mom. I don't have anything exciting. I don't. You know, you know what I mean? I'm trying to think of the lie things are easy because you know everything you don't like and everything like
All right, I've got one.
You go.
Yeah, you go.
I need to think more.
I've got 11 brothers and sisters. I've got a horse. I've got 2 brothers called Matthew.
Wow. Okay.
Horse.
Oh.
11 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And 2 brothers called Matthew. Are they in the same family?
No, so my dad had a brother and
A
my
son,
mum had,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
Popular name,
Yeah,
Matthew.
and then I just started thinking of my family.
That's not, you know, like that's like, oh wow, mine's like really basic. Like, oh I've got
You know, mine was, I just thought,
3
oh, hang on,
sisters
I've got
and
a lot.
brother. Just like
Chuck
who
them in
does it?
there.
You know, you know what I mean?
Anyone else?
Oh,
I have 5 cows, 1 dog, and 11 chickens.
I don't think you've got cows.
Yes, I do.
Wow, okay.
11 chickens.
Yes, I do.
Oh.
A dog.
They're gone. Yeah, got a better home.
Oh,
I'm gonna move, so
oh, okay. Got a better home.
got a much better
A
home.
big
Yeah,
home, yeah. Cool.
she's spoiled.
Wow.
It's good.
Baby?
Well, husband's allergic.
Oh, hang on.
That dog saliva. Yeah.
Don't worry.
Well, I'm done.
oh,
I used to have 3 dogs.
Well, like, if it was 2 lions and a tree, I'd be okay with that.
John?
I looted a snake, turtle, and landed on a flooded airport. At a flooded airport.
You've landed at a flooded airport.
A snake.
So are you a pilot?
I caught a snake.
Oh, you've got one.
Oh, so hang on.
I've eaten
Oh, you've eaten
a
snake.
snake,
Yeah.
turtle, and landed at a flooded airport.
I don't think you've eaten a snake.
Eaten just about everything else.
This is random. I have traveled to the Caribbean, eaten goat, and been to South America.
Caribbean is.
Yeah, I was about to say.
No?
South
America
America.
then.
Yeah.
Because you definitely would have eaten goat.
Yeah.
It's our main source of food in Africa, isn't it?
No, I wasn't there. It was in Greece.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I always wanted to go to Greek island.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it.
That's really nice.
It's not working.
Yeah, you can go.
I have 1 children. I have dog. I had weight 90.
You have
Weight.
weighed 90
Yeah.
kilos. No, that's not true.
That's the not true one.
No dog.
Yes.
Have you weighed 90 kilos?
Yeah, before.
Wow. How did you get from that to that?
Walking.
I'm trying to do that.
I'm trying to do that.
Walking, eating, fitness, yoga.
Okay. Well done,
That's
anyway.
I thought it was a gulag.
Or the vodka.
Vodka. No drink vodka. Yeah.
No drink.
No
vodka.
drink
Ah,
alcohol.
that's no
Alcohol.
alcohol.
Alcohol. Alcohol.
That's the alcohol's fault, yeah.
Yeah, alcohol. No alcohol, 60 yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Have you got any?
It's in the same boat as well.
Just tell us 3 truths then.
I'll do one. I'll give you more time. Okay, I've been to Japan. So I've got the idea. I've been to Africa. And Yeah, I love gardening.
That's the one. That's the lie. That's the lie. I love gardening. You just expression.
I can't
Your
help
face,
it.
facial
I'm really
expression
bad
said it
at
all.
I think that's the problem. Like, it's too obvious.
So what was it, the gardening?
No, the gardening's not. That's true.
Oh.
No. The Africa was the lie. I've been to
Oh.
Japan. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Well,
You
we
can
all-
lie. You just lied to
I did
yourself.
lie, yeah.
Well, then you were
So,
not
no, I
that
haven't
bad.
been to Africa, and you know that. I've been telling you I want to go. But no, I haven't. But Japan, yes, I have, and I am previous of horticulture, so I do.
Yeah, you're on TV.
Yes, I did it.
No, Yeah, I know.
We're also
Ah.
Have you got any? No? Just tell us 3 truths. You can basically tell us anything because you haven't shared much about yourself, so we won't know anyways.
Quiet.
Pick a food thing.
I'm
It's easy.
I'm trying to hide.
Three foods that you love and one you hate. 2 foods you love.
At the TV, like, she'd make a good news host. Like.
You do look like one of those ladies off of the Sunrise.
Yeah.
Okay? Nothing? Okay.
I'm not
No, that's a lie. You're intriguing. You're intriguing. But they are intriguing.
We all are interesting. Yeah, you'll think, if you think about anything, just tell me and then I will give you the floor.
So much easier not going first.
Okay, so I need to get back to my screen. Where's my screen? Right, so my 2 truths and my lies. So I've never had a speeding ticket. I have parachuted, and I'm the great-grandniece of one of the South African presidents. That's the president, actually. So which one is the lie?
First one.
Parachute.
Second, parachute.
Parachute.
I say first one.
Miss.
John's right. I've never gotten a speeding ticket.
Ah.
I don't know why,
When did you
but
go
I found that
parachuting?
The last one was 100% true.
Uh,
You couldn't think of
Yeah.
one like that.
So that's a bit of a icebreaker with the legal system, just as a bit of an exercise to realize how easy it is to fool somebody, you know. So even when you think you're very honest, you know. So okay, the housekeeping stays the same if there's a fire, you know. The front door's that side. There's no door in the back. All I can say. Yes, up in that. Yeah, that's all good. We won't be doing any questions answers today, anyways. But yeah. But if you want to highlight something in the book, you're welcome.
Is that in the book?
No, I don't know. No, I don't think so. None of the things. It's really hard to follow me because I'm sort of not. The only things that are really in the book is the chapter headings. The rest are sort of really a summary. So just about, you all know the breaks. It's interactive, and it's really what keeps us awake. Is actually sharing our stories. And just something I haven't shared yet. I know I'm recording myself, but if there's any, or not always, but if there's any personal things that you do share with each other or with us, with the class, if you want to share something and you don't want it to be publicized, just let me know. Because we do want to also practice privacy and confidentiality. Sometimes some of the issues we are going to be touching on will be really sensitive, you know, and sometimes you may experience something at work that you don't really want to get back to your boss that you've experienced that. So we don't want you know, to get you into trouble in your workplace because you've gone through a difficult thing at work. I share, and like Debbie said the other day, oh, you're recording that and you're talking about where you're working. So I'm trying to be as much as I can confidential on my clients' names. I'm fortunate I've got this 30 years of experience behind me. So I can scramble the stories up, you know, to try to make my clients, you know, so you won't recognize them. But sometimes it does come out. It's happened that I've spoken about somebody and one of my students pick up who it was. So it's not always easy. And we do talk about things like suicide. We talk about death. We talk about emotional stuff. We talk about abuse. So sometimes it can be really confronting. So if there's any one of you struggling with anything we do share about, I am available in the afternoons. You are welcome to come and have a debrief or talk to me at any time. I'm actually doing my diploma in counseling, so I'm working on it to be available for people in the industry to debrief. So that's my focus on one day to be available, because I know there's not always that place for debriefing.
I could
So
have used you last week in that because of what happened. I honestly felt like I needed to just talk to somebody and get my heart back into a normal beat.
yeah.
Because I was just like,
You know, when something traumatic happens at work, you honestly you dream about it.
yes.
You take it home, you don't sleep, you wake up in the middle of the night and it really bugs you. And that escalates unless you deal with it. It sort of can get, you know, to a place where you get overtired and you know, you might do something that you might act in a way that you would not normally act because you're not your best self. I was telling him earlier, my son was with us on the weekend and he's obviously off, you know, his own world. And, you know, and I just was trying to communicate to him, you cannot care for anyone unless you are your best self. If you're not your best self, you actually are harming that person. And I saw that again in his daughter through the night. She was not sleeping and she was really crying through the night the whole time because her dad is not his best self. And he wants to be in her life, but he can't even care for himself, you know. So it's really, really hard. So you need to, you know, that's issues we may share about. And if anyone shares issues with me as well, that's where I have to keep that confidential, keep that away from my work, you know. Although I share stories sometimes about my students, I will definitely obscure it in a way that you'll never know who it is that I'm talking about. So the objective of this specific unit we are doing this week is to discover how to identify and respond to legal requirements, to know how to identify and meet ethical responsibilities that we will have in the industry, learn how to contribute to workplace improvements, and gain the skills and the knowledge for this unit. So in chapter 1.1, we're talking about identifying and respond to legal requirements. In identifying access, interpret sources of information about the legal requirements that applies to our job role. In the legal system in general in Australia, there's two major sources of law. The one is the case laws, where the decisions are made by judges in the courts and legislation. The legal rules are made by Parliament, and then those to whom Parliament have delegated the authority, and then it goes to the High Court, and then it gets passed as a new law. Then there's executive powers. They need that executive powers to make the laws. And then there's the concurrent powers that goes over our education system, our marriage and divorce laws, and our tax laws. So there's the two different types of legal systems we have. Then there's the sources of law that is the judges in the court that makes or that passes the laws. The court, the laws are basically suggested by the PMs, and then it gets put through Parliament. Just a sec. Hello. I might just pause this.
We don't bite.
But did you watch any of that on the spectrum?
No, I haven't.
One of the guys on the spectrum, he's actually in a very serious relationship. He got such a thing with him. That's why we
Yeah,
did
see,
it.
they can do some things, but just I don't think we can do something.
No.
Okay, so we'll carry on. So the High Court of Australia is the highest court that makes that passes the laws, and that's doing the ultimate decision. So these laws are not the constitution laws. So some of the constitution laws cannot just be changed without the public voting for change. These are other laws over and above the constitution laws. Though recently there's been quite a few laws that has been passed that sort of are really like, close to being constitutional issues without, the public opinion about it. So we have to keep an eye, and we have a responsibility here because it is, we are living in a democratic country, and we want to keep being a democratic country. So we want to be a part of that. Then the Federal Court of Australia is the court that deals with bankruptcies, corporation and industry things. This is also where they're doing the HK Commission is on the Federal Court, and I heard this morning on the radio that they're just about to hand down the report for HK Commission that has come to an end now. Taxation and trade practices, laws and things are through the federal. And the Family Court of Australia obviously is dealing with our family issues. In Queensland, our family court is sitting in Townsville. So if you've got any applications, you can actually make it directly to the family court. You can go on in the internet and do application for any issues. Then there's the Australian state and territory courts. These courts exercise the federal authority to issue federal legislations. And then the legal aid system, which you can access if you need to. So within this system, I always sort of try to make sense of it like this. Sorry, I can, yeah. Is this an any question? I don't think it's an any question.
no
You just
idea.
want the interest. Okay, no worries. So, how far are you?
Oh,
I'll come back when you finish. Okay. So within the legal system, I always think of it like this. If it is like the Australian Defence Force, then you know who is responsible for that body. So in the federal government, it's the income support, foreign affairs, the defence, customs, currency, so it's the Australian dollar. So it's sort of in the name to help us understand, on which level is the responsibility. On the state and on the state governments, the social welfare, water and energy. Like with energy or water, it would be Queensland water or whatever. Yes. Transports, the Queensland transport system. So. And justice, it could be the Queensland justice system. Then both state and federal is the education. We do have the Queensland education, but the federal government is also involved in major decisions with education. Health, again, it's in the name, Queensland Health, but then we have our blue card, green cards, what's it called? The Medicare cards that are a federal, federal system. With housing and Indigenous affairs, they are both state and federal. I can send you these slides if you want.
Yeah.
Are you interested? I've got some of them if you want that. So with legislation, we're talking about equal opportunity legislation. that prohibits discrimination on grounds of employment, race, marital status, pregnancy, age, disability, sex. So those are the equal opportunity legislation. Occupational health and safety legislation, which goes mostly through our workers' comp. If you go onto the workers' comp website, it will give you access, and when we do some of the exercises later on, I will take you to the workers' comp website, especially in our work health and safety unit. I'll take you to the website so you can get familiar with that. And that's where you'd be able to see whether your manual handling is within the government or in the state laws. You know, sometimes companies tell you to do things that you can harm yourself, and but it sits within. There's actually a legislation that protects you in that. And then the industry code of practices, I've given you one of them, which is our industry code of practice that applies to all of us working in the healthcare industry. It's the Queensland, is it the National Code of Conduct for Healthcare Workers, which is just this one that I've given you. So this is kind of like sort of our set of laws that we fall under when we work in the healthcare system. And we will use this in one of our exercises to identify the different types of laws that we fall under. I use this law when people apply for this course. I had to use this to say, sorry, I cannot let this person in my class because they obviously are not in line with something. If somebody is one of the things there on number 10 or 11, it talks about healthcare workers not to be under the influence of alcohol and substances, and healthcare workers with mental health conditions. Sometimes you get people here wanting to have a new start, but they still are using drugs, or they may have mental health issues as a sort of a follow on from drug abuse for a long time, and they sit with some of the job actives, and the job actives then send them here, and I'm like, really? And quite often some of them will even profess, yeah, we've just come out of drugs and we're trying to make a new life. That's all fair and fine, but you have to be able to be your best self. As I said in the introduction, you cannot struggle with emotional seesaw in your life, be a bipolar. Yes, some people are, when you are under treatment and your treatment has been established, that's a different story. But even being, sometimes even with depression or anxiety, people really, really struggle to, and when they face really hard situations, they don't know how to deal with it. I've had students that have come in that have had autism or somewhere on the spectrum of autism. And unfortunately, in this industry, we're not trying to be discriminating against people with disabilities, but you cannot go and look after an autistic person if you've got autism yourself, because there's things that irritate you about people. I've had students in the class that get irritated with each other. And I'm like, really? You need to be able to be your best self, be in control. If you are in an explosive situation and you have a client freak out on you, how are you going to deal with it? It's also about protection for yourself, to be your best self. So that sort of falls under our code of conduct for healthcare workers. It is a bit harsh, I know. I have disability companies sending students, and I have to say, I'm sorry, but obviously this person's not fit for this type of job.
I had to refuse someone accommodation once because they just mental health logged him on my doorstep. I was managing the backpackers in that. The hospital logged him on my doorstep with the backpackers saying, look,
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of these, and I've just Googled it this weekend because I keep hearing it. What is it? Orders, something orders. Sorry, there's no receptionist. I'm just gonna.
It's a difference when you get to that point and you are in charge of taking responsible for someone, as opposed to still being responsible in another job, like whether it's a cafe or, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
someone's
just
not
the
gonna-
mental health strain that you put on yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
So then there's this duty of care, which falls under the tort law. The duty of care is a legal responsibility to ensure the care and safety and the well-being of someone else. And it applies to care workers with responsibility for children, patients, clients, employers, and employees. So with the duty of care, I was just watching, my husband was actually watching it, and I caught a few like here and there of it. He's watching one of these true crime dramas of a young lady who's had a boyfriend, and they were SMSing each other, and he had mental health issues, and he had suicide idealizations and stuff. And he was basically bombarding her with SMSs and, you know, telling he wants to kill himself. And she messaged him back every day, like, are you still alive this morning? And that, so this went on for about 2 years. And eventually the one day she was just said to him, okay, now go and do it now and get it done with and just finish it off now.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? And then she went, and then he did. He gassed himself and he killed himself. And then they took her to court. And she was found guilty, you know, but at the same time, halfway through the story, I'm saying my son used to do that with us because he gets high and then he like, oh, I want to kill myself. And then I have said to him, well, go on then, because I get so frustrated. It's like emotional abuse, you know, constantly saying that. But within the duty of care law, the law actually requires that we take due care to somebody else when they want to harm themselves or harm anyone else. So there is, although we don't use restraint in our jobs, and that's illegal, there is a type of restraint where we can actually, when you want to save somebody's life, say he runs down the highway and he wants to run in front of an oncoming truck, where you can go and tackle him off the road, you know, that is excessive force, but you've saved his life. So, and the police can do that. So there is a place of excessive force, and that comes under the duty of care law as well, where we can't use excessive force to protect our clients. For example, you can't stop an old lady at the door, grab her arms and stop her from going out. But if that old lady's got a knife in her hand and she's going for another old lady, you can grab her hands because you're actually protecting the other person. So it's, in some ways, it's a little bit of logic in there, but there is the protection of yourself, somebody else, and of the person's own life, that there is a duty of care, a component in underneath the duty of care law.
So apart from common sense, you're going to be getting into a lot of grey areas when you do anything.
That is true too. So yeah, using excessive force. With the common and legal issues relevant in our workplace, those are the things with harassment. So in our last scenarios in part C, we will cover 3 of these type of issues. We will talk about harassment. We will talk about giving drugs to somebody incorrectly, and the other issue is going drunk to work or going intoxication at work. So those are the 3 legal issues we will be discussing tomorrow. And I will be from time to time refer to that just to get your brains into putting that in context before we get to that, as thinking about that. So these are legal issues, unfair dismissal, copyright issues, patient issues, customers disputes, employee background checks,
privacy.
Privacy and confidentiality, the duty of care and neglect. So with duty of care, even though it falls under the tort law, there is an actual criminal aspect to neglect. When, for instance, if you have a very violent person or very violent client and you lock him underneath the house or in his room or something like that, that can be classed as neglect, and you can be criminally charged. It's like that dad that had the little Down syndrome baby that he never fed, and there was another issue about boys that was kept in a room also recently, about family members that has been neglected, and with other words, the parents were not giving their duty of care towards those children. And then it becomes a criminal offense. When we talk about duty of care under the tort law, so there's the criminal laws and then there's civil laws. So criminal laws is when the police charges you with a criminal offense. And then there's our civil laws where you can sue somebody else. So duty of care falls under the tort law, that's a civil, under the civil law. So your clients can sue you for not giving them proper care. So if they feel like you haven't cared for grandma well enough and you have left her with a wet pad on for too long or something like that, the family can sue you. So that is the civil side between that.
That's the O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, so it's just
Not guilty in criminal,
guilty in the civil, yeah. So that's the whole thing. So that you know, there's always that aspect when working with people. They don't sue companies that much in today's life anymore. They sue you. They sue individuals. So you have to watch your back when it comes to working with your clients. You have to watch your back in knowing the law. Yeah, write everything down. The thing is that you've been told. You got this book when you signed this TAR. You are saying that you've read that book and you understand each and every law. Okay, so read this book and make sure, that's most of the reason for CIT3s are that you have been told. It's not really so much to equip you other than to say that you've been told. And that's where I say from day one, the first week I told you, join the union. Because if you stand alone in a court, you cannot defend yourself and you do not have the words or the knowledge how, there's clients out there. They've gone from one care company to the next care company to the next care company, and they're abusing the care workers. They're taking advantage of the care workers. They are saying that the care workers abuse them. Yeah, right. And then the care workers gets fired or something and they haven't done anything wrong. You as an individual can't go back to your company and say, could you just give me the bit of a background on this client, you know, where does he come from? Then they say, no, it's his privacy and confidentiality. It's got nothing to do with you. Yeah, he's just coming to your company and you stand a chance of being abused by that person when you go into the bathroom with them to give them a shower. Then they say, no, leave me alone, or sometimes they don't even tell you. And then they go make a report about you after. You're standing in a bathroom alone, it's your word against their word. And then, because it's privacy and confidentiality, you can't strip somebody naked in front of a camera. So
that's pornographic then.
Yeah.
I was going to say there was because Mum's been doing it for a long time. She's a social worker as well, like in younger days. So she's been.
Your life can get destroyed by a client if somebody accuses you. I had a student, one of my very first classes. She was accused by an old girl that she was rough with her and she had pulled her legs off the couch very rough. This woman couldn't hurt a fly. She was the softest person that, you know. And then what had happened, the company asked her to resign. She resigned. It was never put on a blue card. It was issues, you know, they just asked her to resign because they couldn't prove it either way. You know what she did? She went to crawl into her house, she was renting a little caravan, and she crawled in that caravan. She stayed in there 2 years. And towards the end of our course, the one day I was talking about something that happened to me that I will share with you in work health and safety issues. I shared this in the work health and then she came to me afterwards. She said, have I ever told you what happened to me? And she was crying. And this was 2 years later. It devastated her. She had worked in the UK and care. She was all over, you know. She's not a young girl, but she was in her late 20s. But it absolutely devastated her. You know, people can destroy your life. That can happen. So protect yourselves. And that's why I say, when you belong to the union, if you have a client like that you suspect that have abused other care workers, the union have got the right to say to your company, can we see that client's paperwork, you know? Can we see the history? Even though you don't have the right, the union have a legal right to call on that history and say, whoa, this happened to a couple of people before, you know? You cannot hold the care worker liable. You can't put that on a blue card. You cannot fire her, you know, because she's, you know, this is a false allegation. Look at the history. But if you do not have them with you, then you're pretty much doomed. That's the bottom line of it. So the legal rights and responsibilities are also reflected in the aged care standards. It's part of our care and education to young people. It's about child protection and guardianship. There's about criminal acts and disability standards, discrimination and harassment, under equal employment opportunities and freedom of information. So these legal rights and responsibilities go over through a lot of different laws. If you look in the back of your learner guide, there's 3 pages with different laws. So every time we talk about a legislation, we talk about, every time you talk about legislation, it is the act and the date, okay? Because you have to be specific, because every legislation is different and covers different issues. Currently, if you go and Google any type of legislation, the bio-law are topping all of it at the moment, which is taking a lot of our general rights and rights sort of masking. A lot of our rights, human rights, are being masked by the bio-law, which is a real, you know, gray area. And we're hoping when COVID eventually goes, that we will have our human rights back the way we used to have it. We're really hoping and praying that that will happen. At the moment, the bylaw sort of covers like, you don't have the right to say no, you don't have the right to not be locked away, you don't have the right to this, you don't have the right to be in a group of more of this at a certain time, and some of our rights are being diminished. And it's really, really concerning if we lose our rights in a democratic country. It really is, you know. I was just listening to the radio this morning about Hong Kong, and there was an, yesterday, they were calling all the lawmakers, the previous lawmakers in Hong Kong, to the police station to come and for some interview, and they were all locked away and they were all charged, 139 or something like that of them, and these are prominent people in Hong Kong. They were locked away yesterday under the new legislation that was passed with something with I don't know, inciting something or the other against the Chinese government. So, you know, these are alarming things, and they're happening on a daily basis in our country. And it's gone past the time, and I'm an advocate for human rights because I come from a country where we've lost our human rights, you know. We've seen it in Zimbabwe, we've seen it in Namibia, we've seen it in South Africa, your human rights disappearing. So being in this country, that's why we came here, because we felt we still have human rights there, and we cannot be blasé about it. We need to stand up for our
Yeah,
rights.
so most people don't even realize what's being put through legislation.
Yeah,
And that is, it's like really, in a way, it's up to us to keep up with it.
yeah, you have to keep your ears and eyes
Just
open.
And everything self-help, there's such a distraction
Yeah,
that's going on all mainstream media, you know, where everyone's like, wow.
and things are just happening.
I don't know, like, just
We
something
have to be alert and be aware.
Anzac Day this year, Queensland has no restrictions yet.
Fighting rights. I'm for human rights, because I'm about that you have the right to choose. Your clients have the right to choose. You know, I'm about dignity and choice,
Yeah.
which is something we practice every day when we go out. It's in this book. I'm not talking anything that's not in this book and that is not but when we look outside what's happening, you know, and it has been a little bit of a eye-opener with the whole COVID thing, to see how much power the national governments have. You know, how much power does the Queensland government have in making decisions that sometimes even overrides the federal government's decisions, you know, and that they can come in, you know, conflict with each other. It does, you know, does seem like there's a snake in the grass.
You know how that law got passed? There is a
They should be all locked up otherwise.
So identify the scope and nature of our legal rights and responsibilities. Mainly in our job description, we will also be alerted and shown, you know, what is our rights within companies. Some of these things are, you know, quite straightforward. Most companies will inform you of what your legal responsibilities are. Read your job description, talk to management. If you look at your standards of service, like the National Code of Conduct, it's very clear. It shows you exactly what the responsibilities are, including things about medication, and we will touch on that, because medication issues has been part of the issues that we are currently fighting about. Especially from the union side, we are busy with that issue. We're also busy with the standard of services with the HCLEG ratios. We're fighting for that. You can also find, you know, your colleagues will obviously tell you, you know, this you're not allowed to do, and you'll be able to learn from that. Benefits of having workplace policies and procedures. So again, workplace policies and procedures are usually a real thick file that sits up in the office somewhere, and whichever it's a green file, and that file has all the different policies and procedures in about, you know, all sorts of different things, our job roles and things like that. A well-written policy and procedure would be consistent with values of the organization, will comply with the employers and others associated legislation. So it would have been written by lawyers as well as industry experts to be complied to associate legislation. It will demonstrate the organization's operations efficiencies. It will ensure that there's uniformity and consistency in decision-making and operational procedures. It will also add strength to the position of the staff when you talk about when there's legal action. Now, I had to go, there was once an issue at work and they did something, and I knew that there was a policy and procedure that was covering me. And I could go back and take them to that policy and say to them, your policy says that this, you know, this, what I did was right and what you're saying is wrong, you know. And sometimes you get RNs, like the one example I can use there was, we used to bring people that are bed fast, we bring them with the beds out to the lounge area. If they are trapped in their beds, you don't always have to put them in a chair, especially if somebody are not able to sit in a chair for a long time. So to help them to have that social interaction, it helps us, and there's very few of us on the floor, that we don't have to keep going to check them in the rooms, but they're in the common area. And then this one RN said, oh, you can't do that. And it was actually in the policies that we can do that. And I took her to that and I said, no, I can. It's, you know, it's for their socialization. It also makes our job easier. Because she was thinking we were just trying to make our jobs easier.
It's horrible,
Which,
actually, when you think that somebody would be stuck in their room in their bed.
Isolated.
yeah.
I looked after a 106-year-old
Oh,
who was bedridden, and she was just in her bedroom at home every day. She couldn't
Yeah.
even get up. Nothing. I thought, oh, I don't know how. She had the humour of note.
did you take her out somewhere?
No, she couldn't get out. She was too weak. You couldn't take her anywhere.
Yeah.
She was in her bed all day.
Yeah, so in the facilities, we can bring them out and we, you know, so they see people walk around and, you know, they can be part of it. Yeah. So it saves time when there's a new problem or it can be handled quickly. So most policies and procedures have a section for each type of thing that you possibly could face in a company. And it also fosters stability and continuity in a company. And it clarifies our functions and responsibilities. Identify and respond to the legal requirements by adhering to legal requirements in the work procedures according to work policies and procedures and our scope of practice. So meeting duty of care, we spoke already about duty of care, but our level of support must meet the duty of care requirement. It means that you must ensure that the client are receiving adequate care in all departments. This includes tasks that you complete by yourself and tasks that are completed by your colleagues and tasks completed by the client. So our responsibility really is massive, okay? I absolutely hate it when somebody says, this is just a Cert 3. When you go out there, you take responsibility for so much more than just, you know, there's no just in that sentence. Because you have to take responsibility for your co-workers. So if you walk into a room and they did not get around to changing Nana's bed and Nana's still lying in her feces from the previous shift, it's your responsibility to do that.
Teamwork.
Yeah, because something might have happened, okay? If this occurs often, then there might be a situation of neglect in there. You know, you might have somebody that are not doing their job properly. But if this is a once-off thing, then you pick up the slack. It's 24-hour care quite often with clients that are bedridden anyways, and they, you know, they might have had something else happen. They might have had a fire drill and the whole house has been upside down. They didn't get around to a lot of stuff. So then it becomes our responsibility, and you will be equally as responsible if that family's come and sue you or sue the company that there was neglect. Grandma's now got a rash on her bottom, or you know, she's got an ulcer because of what's happened, and you know, but you will be as equally responsible. You can't say, well, it's not my job, they didn't do their job, and like say, wash your hands, and then, you know, you have to pick up the slack. You're also responsible for the co-worker working with you when you do manual handling. You have to watch out for them. You know, you feel a responsibility towards them that you're not going to run over their toes. You're going to watch them if they bend down and they're coming up and they're going to hit their head. You know, you're going to always stop. Or, you know, you're going to step in and put your hand in the way or try to protect them like that. You have to, you know, sort of take the responsibility for as much as you can. In your job role, you're also responsible for the client's well-being. So if they don't feel well, you're responsible to report that. It's your responsibility in meeting your duty of care. And the duty of care in the law comes under the ruling of the tort law. So it's a civil law as opposed to the breach of a contract. It requires individual to provide a standard of reasonable care while carrying out any activity that could potentially harm somebody. Breaching duty of care means that you as an individual are liable to legal action from the claimant. So somebody can sue you, I've said that already. Recognize the potential of the actual breaches and report it to the organization organization, according to the organization procedures. So if there's any breaches in privacy, that's chapter 1.4. If there's any breaches in privacy or any aspect in your client's life and care, then you should maintain and promote training about privacy. So one of the scenarios we will talk about tomorrow is where two care workers gossip about a client, and some family member overheard them talking about the client out loud, and then, you know, and you also hear it. What's your responsibility in reporting a situation like that? Obviously, restrictive access to records and information about the client, respecting the client's personal relationship with others. You know, the clients can choose to have relationships. Sometimes we've had at Good Shepherd and other places I've worked where clients choose to, you know, team up, match up, or you know, have a real close relationship with one of the other clients, and they still have a family that, or they might still have a wife or a husband outside, and they choose to sit and hold each other's hands. Quite often it's very innocent, and it goes back to, you know, their childhood, especially with dementia. They're just little best friends. And, you know, we have to protect our clients. It's about them. They're lonely. They're in there. So when the family comes, we might redirect the family. But, you know, I've never seen any client ever get it on or something like that. I've had a lot of people talk about it, but it's, you know, I've never seen it. It's all, I think it's all a myth, really. I think it's all about just that, a companionship, you know, of just being together, of caring for each other. And quite often, as they talk about their mums and dads as if they're still alive, they're back at that place where they are little kids, really, and it's about them having that, you know, friend, a little best buddy there with them. So it's very innocent, and, you know, but we respect their relationship. We don't interfere. We let them be. We respect their sexual relationships and gives them privacy. We give them choice, interpreters if required. We ask permission before we go into their room. Knock on the door. Wait for them to answer back before you go in. On confidentiality, it's required in law. The privacy in patients and records and are the most important aspect of confidentiality. Failure to maintain privacy of customer records is punishable by law, and an organization can be sued by the patient if their records are not kept private. So, recognizing a breach. So there's potential actual breaches that could include discussing our clients outside the work context. And I've heard about some care workers some time ago. They were going down to one of the bowling clubs, and they were talking, they, you know, had a night out, like a social night from one of the homes, and they were talking about the clients, and there was a family member nearby, and I overheard them, and they got into very big trouble. I think they actually got fired. So as I say, there is a need that we have to debrief sometimes. You know, you've got some really, you can get into situations where you've got some really out there clients. You've got clients with a lot of behaviors or a lot of social issues, or, you know, just crazy stuff that you work with, and most people won't get it, and you're not allowed to talk about it anyways, except for your co-workers. But best is that you invite them over to your home on a Saturday morning, and you have a cup of tea and you debrief in your home. Don't go and do it in a public space. It does happen, and I've been out for tea with some of my colleagues, and we land up talking about clients, and you're like, well, we can't do this here. This is not the right place. You have to be careful, because sometimes you get clients that have got distinctive behaviors. And if you talk about them, if the family knows, they know who you're talking about. You know, sometimes you don't even have to say the person's name. So we have to be very careful with that. But as I say, we do need to sometimes get these things off our chest, you know. We've had some clients that can be really difficult, and the one client used to press the buzzer for no reason. He used to just stand there and press the buzzer. And when you come into his room, he would be really cheeky and, you know, and like demanding and stuff. And we all used to get really angry with him. Yeah, and he was very like authoritative, and you know, like he owned us, and we all used to really get angry with him. But you know, talking about him outside the work, you know, together with each other, we'd always go there.
Can I ask something? It's kind of weird because
So just not including the client in your decision-making process. Now there is a element of what's the word? Patronizing a client if they're non-verbal, to say, do you want this? And they can't even say back to you yes or no. It's fine to let somebody know, I'm going to do this, or would you like to wash your face? But if they can't respond back to you, you have to also not be like teasing them because they can't respond back to you, but you still need to include them, still have to inform them.
So we would say, let's go with the face.
Yeah, just, you know, be careful. Yeah, just including them, because it's again part in our code of conduct to inform people of the care you're going to give them. It's part of our legal responsibility to do. Opening their mail, you know, we all know that it's illegal to open mail. Not providing equal opportunities for somebody, not providing single-sex bathrooms, or any negligence towards clients. All right, so we will carry on with chapter 2 after the break. We'll have a... Guys are so overeager. It's good. It's good. But yeah, don't stress so much, please. It's not necessary to stress.
Don't want to fail.
Yeah, you can't fail.
Okay, see you later. I'll see you at the end of the course. Tick, tick, tick.
You got it.
If you go on the wrong side, you can.
Yeah, I will just direct you slowly into a different direction. If I see you're not suited, I might suggest going to Earl or somebody else. Do something else. Okay, so chapter 2, we're talking about the ethical responsibilities, which is one of the examples Debbie was sharing earlier. So identifying and access and interpret sources of information about the ethical responsibilities that applies to our job role. A code of ethics is details of our expected behavior in the workplace, and this Queensland Healthcare Workers Code of Conduct is basically our code of ethics. So it provides consistency and credibility in our professional practice. It also ensures that clients' rights are protected. So in general, a code of ethics would have been subscribed to like a doctor or a lawyer, where you'd hear that a doctor would make an oath at the end of his training, and he'd say, he would make a sworn oath where he'd say that I will do no harm, or a lawyer where I would always put my client's best interest to heart. So other than the code of ethics, which is kind of like a law that we fall under, which is that code of ethics that I've given you, we don't really make an oath. You know, we say, you know, I swear not to do any harm, or perhaps if you drive past a car accident that you feel obligated to get out and go help somebody that's, you know, in a mess there, if you don't feel capable of doing it. But, you know, in general, we do feel the obligation to act in a certain way. You know, it is a responsible situation we find ourselves in, caring for people. On the mines, your You know, your code of conduct would be about your safety. It could be life and death situations, forgetting to tighten a tire, and you know the piece of equipment goes over the edge. But 90% of the time, it's just your own life that is in danger in that situation. Although there's been situations where, like that explosion last year in Moranbah, where people got hurt because of somebody not doing the right thing. But when we work with people, we cannot always predict, we cannot always foresee, where if you work with equipment, there's a set of guidelines. There might be, you know, you might have a card that you can tick the boxes. Okay, I've tightened that, I've put the lock on there, I've put the signs out, I've done this, I've done that. That can help you. With clients, they, you know, with human beings, they throw you curveballs all the time. You just quite often will find yourself in situations where you don't, you know, you just don't know how to react, you know, you don't know how to deal with it. And that's why we have the protection of our supervisors, that we don't stand alone. And I say that from day one. If you go into aged care, your description goes as an assistant in nursing, which is the AIN. And as an assistant in nursing, your first obligations are towards the RN. You know, you're their assistant.
Is that what we're, our title is again?
If you are in, no, if you are in aged care, your title is AIN. But in the care industry, in the disability sector, you are described as care workers.
I just care workers.
Yeah. So in the UK, they call us carers. In Australia, a carer is the person's family member that is their EPOA. But so the descriptions change depending on where you're working. And it's, you know, it's like really not that important. You probably, you know, your responsibility still is towards your client. Or I'm trying to sort of convey to you that you are equally as responsible towards your supervisor or your RN or your EN. You're not in it alone. So don't be like, oh, I don't know the whole law. I don't know how to act. I might not know how to be in a situation. You always have to be on a hotline to your supervisor. They've got the training for that. They've got the ability to help you if anything goes wrong. And as long as you have reported to them, you've already covered yourself. You know, just make sure you also write it, put it in writing as well as reporting it verbally, because that way you help them to do their job and keep them honest, you know, protect yourself in a situation. Like in the Code of Conduct, in the Healthcare Workers Code of Conduct, the Code of Conduct 1H talks about medication errors. I don't have a copy of it. It talks about medication errors, and I will cover it in a little bit more detail in a while, but I just want to put that point out there. It says a healthcare worker must have a sound understanding of any adverse interactions between therapies and treatments being provided or prescribed, and any other medication or treatment, whether prescribed or not, that he or she or should be aware of, that the client's taking or receiving, and advise the client of these interactions. So what does that mean? It means if a medication has a side effect and you are not aware of that, you actually mean to be aware of it. Yeah. So where we are fighting, and with the union, there's this little book about nursing guidelines and management around medication. You really need to get some training. When you go out in the industry, and you are required to assist even with self-medication, because even if you break the little Webster pack open and put the medication on their hand and they are taking it themselves and it's classed as self-medication, you still need to know what the side effects are of those medications that you've given them.
Usually you get a little pamphlet, a little printout from the hospital when they give you a new medication.
Yes, as an individual you do, but now your client might not have kept those, or it might have been, you know. So it's go and get, or Google it. Just Google the side effects. Just familiarize yourself with it. Generally, your company that you work for should give you some training to cover you. There isn't really, it's part of the Cert 3, there is a module that covers medication, but it's only an RN can offer that module. I'm not allowed to because I'm not registered as a registered nurse. So it's very hard to find somebody to actually train you in that module. So they only class it as self-medication, and because they class it as self-medication, I just suggest, very highly suggest, that you educate yourself on what you give your clients and keep it in writing. If you SMS your boss or your supervisor, SMS them. Don't just phone them and say things, you know, SMS them so they can reply to you in writing about, you know, medication situations. Because if you've got nothing in writing, remember, you are the person that's going to get sued. You are standing under the obligation to know what you're giving somebody. It's a real hard one. That's again why I like be working in a facility, because I'll never be expected to do that. You know, I'll never be. But we've been talking to the union about what they call Uberization of care, which is basically what you guys are all doing. You're going to go out, and quite often people register themselves as small business owners. They get a ABN number, and then they go out and do care all on their own and off their own back, and then subcontract in some ways. But the responsibility then all comes back on your shoulders because you don't really have a supervisor. And that's what they call this Uberization. And there's so many pitfalls in that. Please be aware of those pitfalls, and medication is one of them. So when there's any adverse events. So with identifying the scope and the nature of your ethical responsibilities, our ethical responsibilities are to decide whether we receive a gift from a client. I had an old girl in the UK, actually, she said to me, she was 100. And she said to me, oh, she heard I'm going to Australia. So she said, oh, when I was like 35, I traveled to Australia and I went on the bus from Brisbane to Cairns, and I met all these people along the way, and I'll give you some of their phone numbers. And I go, my darling, you are 100. I'm not sure. I'll tell her around, because she came over with a boat, and then she did this trip. And anyway, she was really lovely, and she gave me a bangle. And it was one of these Aborigine, or, you know, like a cultural bangle. And she was really, really proud to give it to me. Sometimes they feel like it's blessing them. They feel like really happy giving you something. And saying no, you're actually stealing a little bit of joy from them, you know. So I took it and I said, thank you very much. And I took it to my RN and I said to them, she gave me this, you lock it away in the drug cupboard and just keep it there. If the family ever comes and they inquire about that, then, you know, I'm obviously not going to tell her. If you work in somebody's home and they give you the wedding band and they say, I want you to have the wedding band, call the family and say to them, Mom's has given me her wedding band. I've put it in the cupboard, because if you don't take it from her, she's going to give it to the next carer. And they might not be as honest as what you are. So take it and go put it somewhere safe, in a drawer in the front room or somewhere, and call the family or write it in your notes that Mum has given you a wedding band. It might be, you know, what have been her mother's wedding band that she's passing on, and then the daughters come along and you get sued for something, you know, somebody else did. Somebody else took the wedding band. Yeah. So please, when you receive gifts from people, in general, we're only allowed to receive flowers and chocolates. That is okay. You never take money.
The best I had is that my class, it was coming up to Christmas, and she said, what would you like for Christmas? And I said to her, I don't know. I mean, she says, well, how about a diamond bracelet?
Oh.
I was like, and I just left her, because I mean, I thought she'll probably forget she even said that. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's it.
Yeah, they can do that. They can give you stuff. because they, you know, they're really so appreciative of what you do. And quite often they don't have cash. And Debbie was telling me about one client that had.
Orders it and then like, I mean, they used to order stuff. I couldn't believe the amount of money they spent.
But Debbie, you told me about the client that got money from her son, and then you found all that money in a drawer. And then Debbie phoned the son, and he just said, "No, just leave it there." And Debbie go, "Well, what if the next carer takes it?" And all the rings and whole stack of rings that she found. You know, it's good to write these things down in their care plan, and that you've locked it away. Maybe if you write it down and you lock it away, that way you keep it honest. The next person then that you hand over to, they take responsibility that it's still locked away. And reporting it to the family, of course,
Also,
that's very
you
important.
build trust with the family then, because then they know that you know, upfront about the stuff.
That's
Yeah.
when the family's honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So, how would you respond if somebody calls you and say to you, "Can you come over for dinner tonight?"
Thank you.
Then you're not allowed to go. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't.
Can I hear that question?
How would you respond if your care participant invites you for dinner at their house after work?
You mean another carer? Or
No, the participant, the client, yeah.
No.
You're there to look after them, so how can they look after you?
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's those gray areas, you know.
Can I make a suggestion? Do you offer that you would like to stay and you help?
But then you're not getting paid for it. So
I don't know.
yeah, no, it's great.
these are ethical dilemmas that you
Yeah,
will
Particularly
face.
if you're looking after
know.
a teenager and it was some birthday. or
Yeah.
something, but-
Yeah, if it's a birthday and the family invites you, then maybe. But you know, these are the decisions you have to make. It's not clear cut. It's not like don't do it. But if you don't get paid for something, if you are not, you know, you have a family to look after. So if you are after hours at your client's house, you're not with your family.
I would use
So-
I would say more from a point of view that it's like you give your little finger, they take your whole hand, in my experience.
That's it. So the minute you start crossing the boundaries,
Yeah.
they, you know, and they will test those boundaries. They're just like little kids in that respect. And I'm not meaning to be ageist or, you know, insulting, but if they see they get away with one
They'll just
thing,
get more and more and
it
more.
will just get worse. Yeah.
Stop
So
dragging
best you keep the
and-
boundaries very clear. You know, after hours, you put your phone. I've got a different phone for work with my phone number on. So I leave it here. It's at 5 o'clock when I go home, I'm not reachable on this number. And I've got my other phone that, you know, is where my family can reach me.
Those other phones.
Yeah. So because you know, before I got this phone, I've had students call me at 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, somewhere along the line, you have to keep the boundaries clear. Or on a Saturday, how do I do? Because on Saturday, it's your day that you'll be doing your assessments. And then you get stuck. And then you think, well, I'll just give my trainer a call, you know. And I need to preserve my own well-being. So, I mean, not overwork myself. So I need to protect my boundaries where, you know, it's for my well-being. It's so that I can keep sane and I can keep going and don't burn myself out. So, dealing with somebody that there's been a crime and your client tells you about a crime, you know, we have the saying in Afrikaans that the sharer is as good as a thief. So if you don't report a crime, you can fall under that, you know, where you actually are aiding and abetting, really. So, yeah, so it's just, you know, it's just being responsible in all times, being ethical and being honest and being, you know, trustworthy in your situations, because people trust you with their lives. So you need to show that type of characteristics in your work. dealing with a request of somebody for they want a cigarette, non-smoking environment. It can be really hard. You see, I mean, I had an old girl. She actually passed away a week after she asked me to take her for a cigarette at work. She had last stage cancer in her lungs. She was on oxygen. She was skinny as anything, and she was on her way out. And she said, "Can you please take me for a cigarette?" Nobody would take her because she's on the oxygen. I'm like, really? It's not going to kill her. You know, seriously, how much joy do they have left in life? You talk about, and I didn't do it outside my work hours. When my work was finished, there was an hour or two left, and I went to the RN and I said, "Is it okay if I take her outside to go and have a smoke?" Because it's in the care home has restrictions around the care home, so you have to go quite far away, and I had her on the wheelchair, obviously no oxygen close by, and took her out to go and have a cigarette. It's not about, you know, whether I smoke or not, you know, it's about her last wish probably, you know. Somebody that's dying and they want to go parachuting, you know, and you think like, you know, it's like just doing something for somebody because that's their desire that you do that for them. But obviously, you have to stay within the rules of your organization.
Well, it says a young woman there, so if you're under 16, you have to refuse.
If she's under 16 and she's, yes, obviously, if there's family, you know, they have to be, that would be their responsibility. So you have to take that in consideration. If they never smoked before, you don't want to be the one that becomes a stumbling block for them. So, you know, but just like, or say you have an elderly client that wants a piece of cake and she's a diabetic. You know, I mean, seriously, how long are they going to still live, and why withhold a piece of cake from them? You know, obviously, maybe make it a little bit less than what you don't give a big chunk of cake like that, but give a, you know, just seeing to, and within your code of conduct, within your scope of practice, within your abilities, and with the permission of your supervisor. Always okay it with them. You know?
In some things I found that the art of distraction was pretty, I learned a lot about distracting people in cases where they can't have what they want.
Yeah, just making a different suggestion. I mean, again, with my daughter, my granddaughter, if she wants a piece of chocolate, I say, it's too late now, you can't have a piece of chocolate, but you can have a strawberry. And she's happy with that, you know. And she's so onto me now with too much sugar. When I took her shopping with me on Friday, I tried to take a chocolate for myself, and she took it, she put it back on the shelf. She said, "Grandma, that's too much sugar." You little so-and-so, leave my chocolate alone. But it's okay for her to get a bunny. I can't have my chocolate. So deciding whether you, when somebody's dishonest about their Centrelink or, you know, an unemployment income, what to do about a co-worker if they're inappropriate. I just heard on the news on Friday, I think I was driving, and there was a care worker in Rockhampton that was charged with sexual abuse, and he was already accused of it like 5 years ago the first time, and the company covered it up, and it came up again. And you know, I've worked like that where a client called me the one morning, and she said to me, what happened on the Monday morning when I came there, one old girl, I went to take her blood pressure, and she was sitting in the wheelchair, and she said to me, that night RN, he really think I'm his age, or he shouldn't get fresh with me or something like that. And it didn't make much sense, so I just let it go. And then 3 days later, and I wouldn't have said anything about it if she didn't tell me that. So 3 days later, another lady called me. She was sitting at the dining room table, and she called me. She said to me, "I've already told that RN and that EN, and I'm telling you now, the night nurse were fondling my breast last night." the Ian and the RN ignored her because she is a smoker and she smokes, she sneaks the cigarettes in, and the night staff and her have a bit of a love-hate relationship. She's got all her faculties, but they put her down to the night people have had arguments with her and she just wants to get them into trouble. And she's a bit of a, difficult client. I wouldn't probably would have said, well, that's the RN and the Ian's job, and not escalated it had the other old lady not tell me the other story on that Monday. And I thought, this is the second person complaining about the same night nurse. So then I phoned the CN straight away and I said to the CN, I've had 2 complaints from 2 different people about this night nurse being sexually inappropriate. And and they kept him on after that. They put him on day shift. He was the loveliest man. They would not, he had a beautiful wife. He was a beautiful young man, and he was,
Bit on the side.
yeah, weirdo. Weirdo. Yeah, so weird. Anyways, but those are the type of things. Listen to your clients when they tell you stuff, and you decide then what to do about that if your co-workers are also even taking somebody's stuff, co-workers taking the old people's stuff or taking sweets or stuff like that. And when your clients tells you things, listen to them. We've had an old girl, she said to me, that one of the old boys, she said to me, he goes in our rooms and he steals our things. And I thought, no, surely not. And this old boy would plot around the rooms every day, and you'd never see him with anything or anything. Anyway, and she kept saying that to me, and we just kept ignoring her. When the old boy died, we went into his room and we retrieved probably about 15 pairs of dentures. we named him the Tooth Fairy after that. He went around the old people's rooms and he stole their dentures. It was from all the things that you could steal. And we would always think like, oh no, it probably went into the wash and it got, missing somehow. And dentures are expensive, hey?
Yeah.
But then in saying that, I've had old people like dig their dentures in the sand, like bury it away or wrap it up in something and actually throw it away because it hurts them and they don't like it, So, but just be aware when somebody tells you something, there's most probably something behind it. So, meeting ethical responsibilities according to workplace policies and protocols and still within our scope of role. Our scope of role is always to seek support from our supervisor in any situation and bring that to the attention of your team leader. Seek advice from our colleagues of what is our responsibility. Look for professional guidelines in your scope of practice. Seek to have a position description clarified, so exactly what is expected from me, point by point. Seek to have your competencies assessed or recognized, so like you are doing the training now, you get that and you know exactly what is your scope of practice. Ensure that all major work activities are accurately documented and recorded, always. If you didn't write it, it didn't happen. Remember that. Always write it down. Consult with your representative from your groups, such as your unions, professional bodies regarding the appropriateness of your job role. So with our job roles, obviously we are not going to inject anyone, okay? Any invasion in somebody's body is not part of our scope of practice, okay? Ever. Now I've heard students come back and say, the client's a diabetic and I'm the only one there and I have to give her the injection. It's a gray area. We're not meant to go into their, and I've heard a student come back to me and say to me, in the interview, they said, well, I manually evacuate the client. That means take the poo out of their bum with my fingers. And
What?
It's not allowed, okay? Please, not even in the care homes by the RNs anymore. We used to do it in the old days, but not anymore, okay? It's so many harmful things can happen from that. You don't put in a drip. You don't put in a catheter. Anything that goes into somebody's body is not within our scope of practice. These days, not even RNs are allowed to put a male catheter in anymore. Where, you know, before the RNs were allowed to, now it's a doctor or specialist that's meant to put the catheter in. Too many things have gone wrong. You cannot do that. That's outside of our scope of practice. It's pushing the boundaries, giving somebody medication. Really pushing the boundaries. It's meant to be outside of our scope of practice. If you don't have the piece of paper for it, and you're not trained for it, then don't do it. Doing wounds, unless you get a wound certificate, don't do wounds. If you have a client, you shower them and they have a wound and the dressing gets wet and the wound nurse is not due to come for another day, give her a call and say to her, the dressing got wet. Most of the time you'll try to protect the dressing and you put a plastic bag around it. If it still got wet, you can give them a call and maybe put a dry dressing on. Okay, you never cover up a skin tear or a wound that has just happened. The RN or the EN or the wound nurse have to come and assess that wound. They have to take a picture of it and put it on the client's file and maybe even go to the doctor to make a prescription of whatever they're going to put on that wound. Some people are allergic to certain types of plasters, certain types of ointments and stuff. Just because that works well for your dog doesn't mean it's going to work well for your client. You know, you just don't do that. If you have a client, anything like happening to your client and you haven't got the certificate to do that. Oxygen. You can't just put the oxygen bottle on and put the oxygen mask on them. There's a certain volume of oxygen that gets prescribed by a doctor. And if you don't know how the oxygen cylinders work and what, you know, liters per, I don't know, force, whatever they do, if you don't have idea about that, you can't just slap that on and just do that. So just stay within your scope of practice, because if you walk out, if you venture outside of it, you are setting yourself up to get sued and get into very big trouble. And again, I take you back to this code of conduct. So in the first code of conduct is about healthcare worker must provide healthcare services in a safe, ethical manner. Without limitations or subclause, the healthcare worker must comply with the following. We must have the competencies in our field of practice. You must have the certificate to say that you can do something.
Quick question. With the first aid, when you get a first aid certificate, is that covering some of the wounds? Like if they fell and grazed their knee? In a support
You
situation.
still have to okay it with your supervisor.
Okay, so
You
bring up-
still have to call and say, and they'll tell you what to put on.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So
they will
our
still.
first aid- our first
Yeah.
aid doesn't-
No.
can't, yeah.
You can supply pressure to the wound and hold the wound close. If you've done the certificate, then yes. But your first aid don't give you the certificate to do wounds.
Yeah, right.
It just, yeah, if you broken leg out in the bush, and even then it says in some of our units, it says we're not allowed to do CPR.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, it's like, obviously sue me if I save somebody's life,
Yeah, right.
you know, but there is,
First aid covers like resuscitation part then, I guess.
yes, but it's just for emergency and it's just for a sec. You still call 000. So you might, you know, try to get that. Yeah, you first call first, yeah, and then you act on it. So, yeah. So in the second subclause, it already says that we need to have the competencies. A says we need to have the competencies. B says a healthcare worker must not provide healthcare to of type outside of his experience or training, or provide services that he or she is not qualified to provide. You know, you can't do that. You're not a doctor. You're not a nurse, you know.
It's like they put you, they'll send you to someone's place expecting that your first aid's going to be able to cover everything.
No, and that's why you take this code of conduct and laminate it and carry it in your bag and you stick it into your employer's face if they tell you things to do that is against your, you know, just say to them, sorry, but this code of conduct says I'm not allowed to do it. I'll stick this code of conduct in the face of many people and saying, you know, sorry, but, you know, unless you can override this law, I'm sorry, this is what I fall under. It's you just protecting yourself. A healthcare worker, then I put H here, which is the healthcare worker supposed to be, have the information to give treatment. You need to know what medications and stuff and what is in the medications. On I, the point I, a healthcare worker must provide health services in a manner that's culturally sensitive to his or her client. Healthcare worker must obtain consent. You must always ask prior to treatment, you know, can I do it? Healthcare worker must report concerns about the code of other healthcare workers. It's our responsibility to dob on people. As hard as it sometimes can be, but it's our responsibility. Healthcare worker must take appropriate action to respond to adverse events. So when somebody has had a big fall, exactly what you did, call 000. Yes, straight away. You do not pick somebody up when they're down on the floor, okay? You need to know. If there's been a head injury or something, they've got a certain way of getting that people stabilizing their neck. If they've broken a hip or something and you get them up, they can get bleeding in there, a spinal injury, and you can harm them for life, or if not, cause they're dead if you start picking people up. Those are adverse events. Drug events can also be adverse events if somebody now, you know, overdosed on drugs, or they've taken a drug and there's been a side effect, or any allergic reaction. If somebody has eaten peanut butter or peanuts and they've swollen up, their throat swollen up, their face swells up. Number 6, healthcare worker must adopt the standard of precaution for infection control. It's our responsibility to make sure that we, you know, wear our PPE, wash our hands. It's part of our job. 7, a healthcare worker must, that's diagnosed with any infectious medical conditions, are not allowed to work. You cannot go to work if you've got a cold or an infection of some sorts, you know, because you can carry that over to your clients. And a lot of our clients can die from a common cold. You know, their immune systems are compromised already. 11, a healthcare worker must maintain with certain mental illness or physical impairments, cannot work in the industry. Obviously, if somebody is they have it under control, if they're bipolar and they take their medication regularly and they are in a good place, they can work. But we should be aware of, if you're working with somebody that gets fits, that you're working with somebody can just be picking a client up or walking with the client and then fall down and have a fit. And then what about that client? You know, so your employer needs to, you know, be told if you've got any health issues, and really shouldn't be working with people if you are like that. Healthcare worker cannot financially exploit their clients. You can't ask your clients to pay you. Quite often when you work with people with dementia, they'll say, how much can I pay? Can I pay you? You know, how much is that? I don't have money. I can't go to dinner. And you have to convince them, you know. Yeah, I always say, pay me in hugs and kisses is my, my currency, you know. So protect the rights of your clients.
Oh, not 3.
Sorry.
Ah.
I haven't done all of them. I just touched on some of them. Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, so you've got the whole law in front of you. Keep going back to it. So protect the rights of your clients. It's part of your ethical responsibility to ensure the protection of your clients' rights. Many of these are legal requirements. These rights are detailed in accelerated standards. The client's rights are detailed in the aged care standards. And one of the units, we are going to be going through the aged care standards one by one. You know, what is the rights, the client's rights? The industry and organizations code of conduct, which is just one of them. The international or national charters, and then just general legislation, you know, just obviously, you know, breaking the law, really. Then any discrimination, which is, under the Discrimination Act. Be familiarize yourself with anti-discrimination legislation. There's the Age Discrimination Act 2004. Try and develop cultural sensitivity. This means understanding the beliefs in other cultures, but it does not mean accept them as your own. So, if you disagree about a client's beliefs, it doesn't mean you have to subject yourself to it, but you still have to allow them to do what they want to do. You're not going to get into an argument with your client because they believe in something, You're not going to try convince them of your beliefs. You're there to care for them, and you have to keep that clear boundary. And it's different to when we have a discussion with our friends than when we're working and getting paid by somebody to care for them. So we have to separate those type of things and really make sure we understand that. There's confidentiality and duty of care, and this is on point 14, healthcare worker to comply with the relevant laws. So these are some laws: the Privacy Act 1988, the Information Privacy Act 2009. The only situation where this privacy information can be disclosed is when there's a serious threat or a risk to the client or someone else. Like if somebody's telling you they're going to commit suicide, you have to report it. You have to call 000. That's duty of care. That's that,
And
and your supervisor, but you most probably will, and you will escalate it. You will call for help because we're not qualified mental health care workers. So other than that, the client may choose to disclose the information, but it's their choice. They don't have to tell you everything about themselves. It's their choice. Chapter 2.4, recognize the potential ethical issues and dilemmas and discuss it to the appropriate person. And there's many ethical dilemmas we may face. Conflict of interest, as I just mentioned, if your client's got a certain type of religion, or even just conflict of interest in the sense of working with somebody working with your partner in the same company. I had submitted a couple's resumes last week, and the company called me back and said to me, we can't put them both on because it's against our policies and procedures because they're family. And I can understand at Good Shepherd, the husbands and wives often work opposite shifts. They're never allowed to work on the same roster or with the same clients. But I can understand in a house environment where if the one goes in and then the other one comes after, that they might potentially cover up for each other if the supervisor is not always in the house. So that might be an ethical situation. Another conflict of interest is caring for somebody caring for your nan or caring for somebody. I had the privilege to look after my grandma when I first started nursing. That's why I started nursing, because she had a stroke and she raised me because my mum was disabled. So my grandma raised me, and when I was about a standard 9, year 11, she had a stroke, and then that's why I went after school to do nursing. And eventually her family decided to put her in the home where I was working. But it took about 4 years, if not longer. I finished school 1987, and I only started looking after 91. So it took a while for her family, for my mum's brothers and sisters, to make the decision to put her in the home where I was working. And of course I asked them many times, but they were worried about that. They were worried about the conflict of interest in looking after her. fortunately, I was lucky that my company didn't worry about that, and they were happy with me looking after her. And it's all about preferential treatment and this and that. But you know, I loved them all equally, really. But was my grandma, and the reason why I did it was for her. And it was really amazing that I was able to look after until she passed away. Yeah, so those kind of, but it can be a conflict of interest. You know, company may, you need to maybe tell the company if that happens, you know, if it's an auntie, it's a mother's sister or a niece or somebody you land up looking after. And utilizing your work time to sort out personal matters, you know, can be a conflict of interest as well. Maybe sometimes we're all mums, we all, or dads, we all have issues, you know, that sometimes these things cross over and we have to quickly make a call. That's a different story, but specifically, yeah, specifically using your company's time, it's stealing their time. It's like when you're arriving late to work or you leave early, you're actually stealing from yourself at the end, because if you get caught out, you know, you'll lose your job. So taking credit for other people's work. In our industry, unfortunately, our work is other people's work and vice versa. It crosses over, really. Yeah, but I mean, again, in your assessments and stuff, there is accountability there, that if you do go and Google something or you find something somewhere, to do a small reference in honor of that person. There's, of course, like Joel mentioned, with plagiarism, there's a certain percentage of somebody's work that you're allowed to share without it being plagiarism. But it's only small. I think it's only 6% or something anyway. So it's not a, you know, not a huge, you can't share like 20 pages out of a book from somebody else's work. Harassing colleagues or clients, you know, just we have a scenario in Part C project about a young man that's disabled that is harassing one of the student employees and saying that he wants a phone number and he's, you know, and then we'll talk about the scenario tomorrow, but just putting her in a place where she becomes overwhelmed and starts crying because she feels harassed. So there's the anti-discrimination, there's the Fair Work Commission, that these things you will be given when you start employment anyway. You'll get the Fair Work papers and you'll have to sign that you've read them about bullying and unfortunately bullying is still very prevalent in our industry. I do think, you know, BHP's got a lot to do with it, and they can hear me, but it's true. And Makai, I think we are very influenced by what happens out on the mines, because we still sort of work directly and indirectly with that same types of attitudes. There is a lot of bullying going on everywhere you go. If you go into the industry, there's a lot of especially the older nurses thinking they know better. You come in with, you know, the new laws and rules and stuff, and they still, you know, in their old ways. And yeah, and then and you get some really like harsh people that can be really rude and horrible if you as a newbie come in and you don't quite know your way. And you know, I had one student, she started working somewhere, and she about her third shift, she came back, she called me, she was in tears. She said she arrived at the house, and when she arrived there, she could see from the front door through the little glass that the care worker that was in the home were sort of cheeky, and like, you know, a whole attitude towards the client was like over familiar. And then she went and she knocked and they didn't answer. And then eventually she went in because they were ignoring her. They could see her, but they just didn't open the door. When she went in, she waited for them and they were talking about their own issues in front of the client. Then she went and she reported them. She just done the scores and she went out. She's this big Maui lady, you know, and she looks like she can take anything, but she's really got her hardest like that. And she yeah, and then she went into the office and she was sitting in the office and she felt just they were rude to her. Then she reported them. And then the manager said to her, send her back to that same house. And when she went back to the house manager then went on her case because why did she report them and how, and this person's been such a good worker. They've been doing this for 15 years with the same client. And, you know, this, and she just said, I can't do this. And she walked out because she couldn't face the conflict. She just was feeling like she was being attacked. And she came to me crying, and I put her on to Don, and he's at Mackay Lifestyle Choices, because when Don came to visit us at one stage, the one thing Don said that he does not tolerate bullying at all. And I said to her, call Don, but don't tell him you want a job. Say to him, you wanted me, and if you promise me that you won't let me get bullied, then I'll come and work for you. You know, give him a challenge, because he's like that. You have to, with Don, he's a character on his own, hey. And he's grown on me. When I first met him, I didn't like him a lot, but now I do. He's just grown on me. But the one thing I know, what I really respect of him, is that he's been, he really does what he says he does. He's really, you know, that type of character. So, you know, yeah, and then she got the job with Don, and she's really, really happy there. And she's not being bullied, and, you know, and she's not, that was the first time she's bullied. When she first started with the class, she was working somewhere, same situation, she was in a home, and the one lady was sickly. I think she was saying she was feeling sick, she was coughing and stuff, and they kept getting her up. Get up, come, let's go out, and kept taking her out even though she wasn't feeling well. And eventually she just put her foot down. This client's not feeling well, she's staying in bed today. And when the next team came on, they were complaining, why did she not get up? And she said, well, she's not feeling well, you know. And she reported them. She reported to the supervisor the way they were treating the client. And this kind of things happen all the time. All the time. And these are just, not everyone shares these things with me, but because she knew that I would listen to her, she did share it with me. Just recently, my daughter-in-law was sharing with me at the place where she was working. They were also forcing the lady, she's got autism, so she kept changing her clothes. 20 times a day she change her clothes. So they would take her clothes and hide it away because she's changing her clothes too much. But then she starts, you know, having behaviors of concern. She'd sit on the stairs and just scream at them the whole time while they're there. And they're like,
What else has she got?
you know, yeah. And I'm saying, like, even now, like sometimes you get a label in your shirt and it's scratching you. Can you imagine you are autistic and you are sensitive to touch, certain
Materials or
textures or
anything,
stuff, you know, it must be driving her insane. And then eventually my daughter-in-law said to them, no, what is skin off your back? Why don't you just let her do what she wants to do? And they still didn't listen to her, and then she resigned. She said, well, that's it. I have enough, you know. Again, those people that are looking after those two girls have been looking after them for 15 years. They become over-familiar. And that's where the problem starts. So, and, you know, Debbie emailed me when she started. She said, can I RPL some of my stuff? Because I've been in the industry. But she, you know, and I explained to her, it's really hard to RPL this stuff because the criteria is so long. I've had one student come in here throwing her weight around. She's like, I've been 5 or 7 years in the industry and I have to do this and that. I said, well, I had to do it. I had to do it. And I said to this one student, I said to her, you know, it's people like you and I that are the troublemakers in this industry. It really is. The people you're going to bump heads with is the older nurses, the ones that have been out there for 15, 20 years because they think they know it all. But the new HK standards is quite different to what it was in 1987 when I did my training in the hospital. We should tie people to chairs, and it was the right thing to do. It's not the right thing anymore.
Can I just say, on the first day, when you mentioned that, I had like such a great deal of respect that you can sit here and talk about anything in your past. That was not right. Tell us the story, no matter how bad it might come across, but you're telling your truth. And I think I just loved how you done that. Like, and I mentioned it to Sarah. I was hypnotized. You know, like
Yeah.
she can sit there and talk about her own flaws in the past. You know, what wasn't right, but at that time, it may have seemed
It was
like
the
that,
right
that
thing
was
to
the
do.
right thing to do.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
wasn't
and I just
everyone
love how
did
you
that.
can do that,
Yeah.
and the fact that you don't feel that there's nothing else that you can't learn. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Gonna learn something new.
And that's why that is so prevalent to me. Every day we learn something new. The one thing one of my bosses told me when I just started working, I was about 17. My boss said to me, familiarity breeds contempt. And that never left me. Even when you have a very good friend, if you become over familiar with your friend, you can be rude. And you know, it's like, again, my daughter-in-law a couple of years ago, probably about 2 years ago, her best friend, they've been in school all through high school and they're still best friends. She's lived with him and everything. The one day they were sitting in the room and Valerie was outside playing and Valerie was crying and she was on her phone and her best friend was on her phone. And her best friend turned around and snapped at her and said, can't you look after your child? But they had banter between each other. Okay, they play around, they tell each other off all the time. But that Banton didn't go down well. She was then offended by what her friend said to her. It hurt her, and then their friendship was over. It damaged their friendship because they became so familiar with each other that they crossed the boundary. You know, and that's that. You need to always be aware of that. When you start getting to know your clients very well, and I've stepped in that. I had one old boy, he looked like a sailor, he had a big white beard, and he was such a funny old boy. He was just funny. And I used to banter with him all the time because that was his character, actually. He would just give it back to you like that. And I loved playing around with him. And then one day I was playing around with him and I was joking with him and I said, come sit down, something like, you're not on the ship now, and you know, the ship is not rocking, so you'll fall over because, or something like that. I said, you know, just joking with him. And he was actually a real sailor, and he had the sailor look and all. And then this one EN came to me and she said to me, you know, that sounded a little bit familiar. And if I didn't know you, I would take that as an insult. Like what you've just said to him as an insult. I tend to be over familiar. I tend to joke with my clients. I tend to have that as my character, to play around and, you know, and make jokes. Yeah, and it can be appropriate in the time, but there is places where somebody walks in, don't know you, and that situation could be interpreted as something else than what it is, you know. So be aware of that, and that really is these issues about, just ethical issues, dilemmas, where you find yourself not acting in a professional way. We always have to be professional, you know. It's part of our jobs to say to you that, you'll have poop up the wall, but at the same time, it's maybe not professional, but because it's a scenario we'll find ourselves in, I try to be real about it. But I have to also hold myself back not to frighten you away from it altogether, or to be too frank or too rude, because there's always needs to be that standard that we bring ourselves across as decent human beings, not as rednecks or, no matter what our backgrounds might be, even though, I might come from a bit of a wild school of life, we still need to be able to sit around with the queen and have a cup of tea. You get what I'm saying? It's about being professional and acting in an appropriate way. So recognizing our personal values and attitudes to take into account a non-judgmental practice. So values and principles and standards and qualities that an individual or a group of people hold in high regard. These values guide the way we live our lives and decisions we make. A value may be identified as something that we hold dear, or those things or qualities which we consider to be of worth. So I have found that from country to country, different countries are, and even from people group to people group, people's values are different. What Americans put in high regard is not necessarily what Australian will put in high regard. If you work with the Germans, they're different breed altogether. And, each people group have their own values. And we need to just try to identify that, because something might not be of high value to us. If you imagine working with somebody from the Islander community, for them, their value is the land. They serve the land, they don't own land necessarily in their culture. Where we own land, we all about, buying a house or buying a farm, and we're the owners, and it goes from one generation to another, and we are the boss of that land. Where their view is different, and because they come in with a different view, they have a different set of standards and values towards their practices in whatever respect they show to the land. And by all means, there's been some degrading in those values through, the influences from the world. And if we think about the influences that comes in our lives through media and the way we approach things, it changes all the time. And we always think that if you are not open for change, or you get stuck in your old ways, that you become, what is the word? Absolute. Your opinion is not valued because you are stuck in your ways. If you think about a generation that was born in the 40s, my dad was born in 1945. He's now passed away, but his generation would have gone through the 50s, and he would have been a teenager in the 50s. And that was the time when they were going through the Great Depression. So toilet paper, food, they would hold dear food. They would not throw anything away. We today, we are all about fast foods and that type of thing. We just don't put as much value to things than what they would, because they went without it.
Mum says her family was considered rich because they could have jam and sugar.
Yeah. So what we, those are the values. So you might work after an old girl, and she might wipe her bum with one block of toilet paper, and she folds it up in little squares. And you're like, come on, just bring the toilet paper down.
It's cheap now. Use more.
White gold. What do we call it in Africa? White gold. Well, it becomes white gold in Australia when they talk about COVID. It's white gold day.
I can believe how empty the shelves were of toilet paper.
Why? I just don't get
How much
that.
do you need? Really?
Of all things, you could stock up. Really don't know. Listen, this shit has really hit the fan now.
In a little way.
We better stock up or something. Yeah, no, don't get it. But when you work with people, just try to be sensitive to that. Something that you might disregard or don't value, they might, value put high regard to. Use effective problem-solving techniques when exposed to competing value systems. So competing value systems. In the work environment, you may face ethical dilemmas that may be torn between the needs and the desires of your client or your own personal values or beliefs. When there's a conflict of values, you are faced with the decision over which one is the most important. Remember always, the client's health and safety should be your number one concern. So whenever you are, you know, in a dilemma and you can't decide, you know, where you sit at with something, the client is the one that determines where, because ultimately they're the ones that pay our wage. So, yeah,
Well,
I mean, it does not mean if you serve a client that I say, yeah, I can only think of really bad examples. I won't
If you're
use.
Indigenous and Australia Day comes around, and you
Well,
feel,
yeah.
you feel a compulsion to actually celebrate Australia Day, and they're obviously dead set against
Well,
it,
I
right?
just learned something last week because I discussed that with somebody, and then they said to me, and I went to look at that because I forgot that I actually learned that. When Captain Cook landed in Australia, it was in
1780.
April.
1770 or something.
Yeah,
1780.
it was in April. It wasn't on Australia Day. Australia Day is the day
So
that
the
Australia
government
became a
actually-
federation,
Yeah, the government
which was
paid
in
it.
1908. So it's
Yeah.
not the day
No.
that they
No, it
were
wasn't.
invaded.
No, it wasn't.
So yeah, that puts it in a different perspective or in different, you know, it's a context, because it's really the day they became independent from Britain.
Yeah.
So, which is actually really your Independence Day. It's really our Independence Day, not the day that Captain Cook
No, it wasn't
invaded.
Day.
Yeah. Yes, you see, and that's quite often what happens. People are not informed, and then you're misinformed, and then, you know, and then it becomes an issue where it's not meant to be an issue.
Well, the main
It's-
issue is that through that independent government that actually controlled the Aboriginal lifestyle.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't
Made
mean
all
that
the
the
laws
government,
for them.
yeah. And it doesn't mean that the government always did the right thing. We saw what
No.
Rhiannon shared the other day.
Yeah.
The government had a lot of wrong approaches in that itself, you know. But yeah,
that's
with
more
Australia
so-
Day, it does put it in a different, because that day, the five state and
Territories,
after territories, 5 states in the 2 territories was established. So it was on the 26th of January 1908, which is different to the
Basically,
date.
when we took their land and owned the land for what?
No, because that's the day we became independent from Britain. So it would have been the day that the government, Australia, formed their own government and broke away from Britain. And there was the states, there was the territories included in that, which identified Northern Territory and the Capital Territory, which now is run by, and has been for a long time, by Indigenous Affairs. The Northern Territory, isn't it? They've got the chief, the chief.
Well, they still get royalties up there for all the mines and everything.
Yeah.
They've got their own land councils for each individual.
Yeah.
area.
I mean, it doesn't mean that the government has always done the right thing. That's true. So identify and meet ethical responsibilities and recognizing unethical conduct and report to appropriate people. Unethical conduct is the situation where someone is behaving with disregard to professional ethics and putting your client at risk. Gossiping about your client in a social situation, behaving or speaking in a discriminating way towards others, arguing in front of your clients. Can be very disturbing for people, you know, when you argue in front of them. Include your clients. Quite often your clients may be isolated, especially if you get somebody like a 106-year-old lying in a bed all day. If you tell her about your weekend, or you may be sharing with your co-worker about your weekend, but also including your client in the conversation. We have one client that she's got MS and she's in a bed and she's still on Facebook. She's completely bedridden, and she hasn't got a, you know, she loves going out still, you know, care workers take her out, but she's only young, so she actually enjoys hearing the stories. She enjoys it when we bring our lives to her and talk about it and share about it, because it sort of opens a window for her into the world, really. So, but include them in your conversation. Don't talk over them. They're humans. They're there. You know, you want to include them. So recognize the potential and actual conflicts of interest and take appropriate actions. Conflict of interest is any situation you have the ability to make a decision that could potentially benefit the client but could also impact on yourself. It's a situation where there's potential to take an advantage of your client, and this could lead to doubt over your ability to perform your job effectively. Any situation where your influences impact on the ability to perform your job or to be professional and objective is a conflict of interest. So if you feel in any time that something is really bothering you or you really don't, it doesn't sit well with you, like Debbie was saying, you know, just don't like this. This is a conflict of interest. This is a, you know, this goes against everything I am. You take yourself out of the situation. It is fine. It's okay to say no. A lot of us cannot say no, but it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I can't do this. We are a team. We don't stand alone. You know, you have
Somebody
other
might be able to do
people.
it better.
Somebody else might be able to fill in for you
Yeah.
if you feel like you really can't do something. I heard about one student that the client reminded her of her brother that had suicide. So she just went to the home, and when she met the client, she's like, no, can't work with this client. So she went back to the care company and said, sorry, I really can't do it. He just reminds me so much of my brother. I'm, completely overwhelmed. And yeah, and most companies, and you'd think and ought to today, really put the client's dignity and choice at the center of care, will also make sure that their employees are happy in their work. Because if you are not happy, your client won't be happy. You know, if you're uncomfortable, your client's going to feel that, you know.
It's just like a baby.
Yeah, I had a long conversation with one of these care companies on Friday. The woman was calling, she's been calling me for weeks now for employees. She's looking for men. And I said to her, you know, you guys, I send people to you, they start working and I never see them in the class again. Because it's not a legal requirement for you to have the certificate. They just absorb your time. You're gone.
So did you tell them about that?
I did. I said, I said, not just that, you need to promise me that if I do send anyone to you, you're not scheduling them on the days that they're in the class. And the other thing is, since she was going on about something, and I said, and really, you need to follow example from other care companies to make sure the clients are happy with the care workers and vice versa, because you actually shoot yourself in your foot. At the end, your clients will leave you. If you send a care worker to their place every time that they don't like, or because the care worker don't like them,
I'll move to another company.
they're going to go to them. And you know, they are moving around in town. It's not even funny. These people are going from one care provider to the next care provider. It's just, you know, constantly changing.
I had a situation which kind of combined both of the things you're talking about. One was, it was a man, and he was quite a big man, he had dementia. And I went in, and the carer that stayed there generally was a man. And this client, because he had dementia, obviously it was quite bad. He couldn't really eat very well, so he messed a lot. When he went to the toilet, the first day I was there, he went quiet for a while, and I thought, wasn't he? So I went to go and check on him, and he was literally from here down was poop, and his fingers, hands, everything. And now I couldn't even get into that small toilet under the stairs to help. So I was trying to help from like in front, and then he could hardly walk. So trying to get into the shower, and then it took an ages to get him upstairs. And then I couldn't manage him.
Didn't they
He
get some
took
help?
up so much of the shower, I couldn't even get to the shower handle or anything or control the water. And I phoned the company and I said, I'm sorry, but this is not, you should never have sent me into this job because I'm a small person and this is not manageable for a woman, small woman. He was too large to get around and it just was like one of those jobs. And I said to him I needed to leave the next day because I can't do this. And besides that, there were other things like there was no food in the house or anything. And yeah, so in that instance, I sort of thought, I can see this potentially down the line. I'm not going to manage the job. Because if he fell, I mean, not fell, but I mean, if he did something in that condition that he was in, I wouldn't be able to do much.
Yeah, that's so great. I was going to say the fact that they didn't assess his home under the fact that
They actually are called, I said
he
to
should
them,
be
they
in a
needed to
one-level
send
place.
a supervisor in, and
That's
they did actually.
yeah, reassess his environment because that I mean just
To
in
me,
one
he
place they
progressed
have
too far.
yeah, that's it. They need to get they don't even
There's no funding.
I know what that's like.
Yeah. So that's,
Yeah.
They need to get back to
for his
NGOs
sake
straight
and
away,
for
you know.
mine.
You see, if there's no behaviors recorded, he won't have much funding. Even though he's got dementia because he's placid or whatever, they need just the
He
funding.
really was not coping.
Yeah.
He physically
Just fall
should
through the
not have
cracks,
been in
wouldn't
his
he?
own home.
He
Yeah.
obviously did fall through the
That's
cracks.
what they're teaching with youth in crisis, the troubled things. The more they smash the house, the more help they get, the more
Yeah.
funding they get.
Really?
Yeah.
And they can get their own high house, and they get 24/7 care, and they can smash the TV every day, and fix the TV every day.
Yeah.
The more the nastier you are, the more money you get.
Yeah, that was a company. My mum worked and went through that, and she saw that was going on a lot. But that's what they do. It's true.
Yeah, the more the behaviors is, and then you get this most lovely old people that, you know, just don't cope, and then there's just no money to look after them. So managing conflicts and interest, the best method of managing is to avoid this in the first place. Having clear policies and procedures and code of conduct in the workplace will make the issues clearer to all workers. Some of the subjects include declaring your conflicts, professional client boundaries, how to make an objective fair decision, how to act in an incident of being given a gift, how contacts functions, how services should be delivered. In chapter 3, we talk about contributing to workplace improvements. Chapter 3.1 is saying identify situations where work practices could be improved with legal and ethical responsibilities. To proactive sharing feedback with your colleagues and supervisors. Chapter 3.3, identifying and take opportunities to contribute and review the development of policies and procedures. The HK standards is the new, these are the new HK standards that came out 2019 in September. They're working on the disability care standards. Unfortunately, the disability standards are still the old standards. In chapter 3.1, identifying situations where the work practices could improve. So this is an example of the improvements that is meant to be happening in the HK sector specifically. And these standards are what the company gets their licenses, or they get when they what do they call it, when they come and check up on the companies and see if they are you know, the improvements, or that they're giving the proper care, the standard of the care is up to scratch. They judge them on these standards. So the standards being, the first standard being customer dignity and choice, that sits in the middle really of all the standards, and then the other standards are connected to that one standard. So, and if you fail 2 of these standards, then you don't get your, the licenses to operate. And it's not easy, it's not difficult to fail, because if you fail 1, you automatically fail 2. Like if you have not got any ongoing assessment and planning with your, and they call them customers, not clients anymore. We used to call, in the olden days, the older people were called patients. Then they became residents, and then we went to clients, and now they're customers. In disability support, they call them participants. It's all about the, I suppose the customer's always right. You get that concept. Or with participants, the concept is that you're actually just there and they're the ones that have to partake. They have to be the ones that actually are doing the things. You are just there to assist them. So about the personal care, standard 4, the daily living activities. Standard 5 is organization service environment, 6 is the feedbacks in human resources, and 7 in the organization governance in 8. So that's how the standards sit around the 1 standard, the middle, dignity and choice. And say there's something wrong in the service environment. The bathroom floor, the floor doesn't drain properly, then you're taking the customer's dignity and choice away because they can't use that bathroom properly, and they can fall or something can happen, and then automatically they fail to standards.
Customer that's getting her NDIS come in, they do all that assessing, in their house to see what needs to be changed, so what they'll get funding for, like if there's stairs, they'll make a space for rent, they'll actually come and build rent, they'll remodel the bathrooms to have all this stability. So that's actually what companies should be doing now, if that's the case like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what that's just something at the moment that I'm learning as well.
Yeah, and because but there's one big pitfall with this whole dignity and choice thing, is that a lot of care workers are going, oh, he did not want to, and then they just leave them, instead of being a little bit more persistent, or just showing a little bit more dignity, giving them the dignity part of the dignity and choice. Quite often people are get left in a mess because the choice part gets put forward.
There's a bit of a line there, isn't it?
Yeah, and you do get that most care companies prefer to employ older people, because younger people, they think like you'd be easier for you to just walk away and say, oh, I tried, I asked him. And
depends on the way you word the question.
Yeah, and I think, and some of it does come with experience and age, just to be, like Debbie was saying, that diverting or just a bit of persistent, distracting. But I have a friend, when she started in care, she was 17, she's 21 now, and she's the best nurse in the world. So it's not, quite often people that go into care, like you already having a farm and all that stuff, already makes an old soul, doesn't it? You probably, most of your friends are much older than you. Yeah. So that's the same with Leanne, my friend. Her mum was first my friend, and after working with her for 5 years in aged care in the dementia ward, she's now, me and her and I are better friends than what her mum and I are, because we've worked so closely together, and she's such a good little nurse. So it's not always the thing, but there is quite a bit of frustration in the care company and the aged care facilities where people are just getting left. They're not, I don't want to shower. Okay, well, bye. And then you don't see him again. Instead of being like, come on, let's go shower. No, not asking them, I just encouraging them a little bit more. You can't use force, but you can be persistent. And I was listening to the Australian Defence Force advert yesterday, and it was saying something like this. It was going where we change people with creativity into engineers and people with persistence into leadership. I thought, oh, that's good. At least I'll be something if I go there, because I'm quite persistent. But, you know, it's just having a little bit of, you know, I don't know how to put it other than a bit more forceful, but you're not forceful, you know, but you have to be a little bit more convincing. Persuasive, yeah, the art of persuasion. So identifying improvements at the work practices. If you spot a particular legal issue and are requiring in your workplace, you should endeavor to improve the practice, to remove or mitigate these circumstances. The exact nature of your work practices that could be removed will depend on your workplace environment. So quite often, you know, like this being a legal issue, because of, and to be honest with you, actually, the thing with the duty of care, I only really sort of studied that thoroughly last week, because with one of the units I'm doing at the moment is about suicide and critical responses, and I only recently understood the whole aspect of duty of care towards somebody that can harm themselves. You know, because for the longest time in dementia care, our hands was tied. When somebody soils themselves, you can't get them to shower. You know, we were told you're not allowed to get them to shower. You can't force them into the shower. Where back years ago, we would march in there, 2 of us or 3 of us, and we would just grab them by the arms and we would just forcefully get the clothes off and start showering them. You can't do that, because firstly, you'll harm them. You know, you will give them bruises and you'll harm them. But I've had incidents where clients are get into the room and they're throwing you with their feces, and it's all over the place, and it's everywhere, and they're swearing at you, and you know, you're tiptoeing around it. And this is in dementia, and it can happen with people with autism and stuff like that. You get into situations like that. That's where you go, not getting paid enough.
Trying to get me out of here.
You know, I'm not getting paid enough. But, you know, where we've gone into rooms and that happened, and they like, okay, you go out, you breathe deeply, you might go put a different shirt on and go in again and say, hello, Johnny, I haven't seen you for a whole week. I haven't been here, and, you know, and then make as if you're somebody else and then try to convince them. But we've been in situations where you go and you put the shower head on and you spray him off a distance just to get them, and then eventually when they start getting wet, they start taking again. But the problem is that they actually are harming themselves, because I've had that one lady, I told you about her, I think, that she soiled herself and she walked with a pad for 3 days. She walked with that pad. She was young. She would smack us with the soiled pad.
Oh.
So she'd just walk up and down, and she was always on the go. She would do this. She'd walk around, just do this, and she'd go. And if you get in her way, she smacks you silly. She smacked me once because I stopped her from going out the front door, and there was little kids there, and we are a high secure unit, so once she's on the street, there's no stopping her. So I had her at the door, and I stepped in between her and to let the family out with the little children, and she was wrapped up. She was ready to smack them, and I stepped in between her and these little kids, and she started slapping me on my chest. I was bruised on my. She must have hit me like 30 times on my, not 50.
Oh, you just let her.
Well, what do? You can't, if you step out of the way, she's on the street and then I don't catch her. And then my job, then it's much
And you can't.
harder. You know? What do? You know, or you get her, she
That's
used
what I'm
to,
asking you. What do you do?
sometimes you just put yourself in the way. I've had many
So
times.
you can't stop her at all. You can't put your hand out and she just smacks
She's
your hand
too,
and
she
sit in
smacks
chest?
you. She smacks you. There's no way you can, you know, I mean, that's where restraint or excessive force you might grab her arms if she's had like a knife or something. You might,
Only if she's.
it would, you know, you allow them to use excessive force. But I can't use excessive force on her if she hasn't got a weapon. Even though she may harm the little old 80-year-old. You know, even though
You
I may
just stand in the
you
way.
just stand in
You
the
gotta
way.
put
And
your-
luckily I'm a big girl and
And you
that's
get
why I
harmed
build up
instead.
flesh to take the punch. But then somewhere along the line, I got to a place where I couldn't take it anymore. I was like, no more. I'm finished. I'm not doing it anymore. That's it, you know. Told my doctor, give me a letter. I'm not to work in dementia anymore because you get slapped around that. The one day with this one old boy that always soils himself, he was in the lounge and he picked a little table up and he was hitting towards another old girl. And I came in between him and and he had a weapon. That's a weapon. So I grabbed the weapon away. And once I took that away, he wasn't able to get her. I stood in between him and her, and then I got her out of the way. And I said, come, while I was shielding my body from her. And he was bashing me, but I took her out. And then when after she was safe, I went to the RN and I said to him, you call the ambulance right now. And unless the ambulance come and get him, I'm going home. I'm not taking it anymore because I was ready to get him. Then I was ready to get him. I was like, because
He's
the
holding
police
him up.
can't take him.
They can't.
No, he's demented.
In that work
Oh.
olden days.
Oh, yes. In the olden days, we would have tied him down long ago. Yeah, or medication. And that's where now you're not even allowed to give medication anymore. So,
The union
Oh.
participated
Oh,
in,
had a room.
differentiating the payments for people who work with high risk, low risk, high.
all the same, $23 an hour, we all got paid the same.
Yeah, but so the union doesn't take.
No, look, I mean, the union will be part of your EBA, but your EBA doesn't make a distinction between high risk or normal, you know. If you work just in the high care unit or in the high dementia unit, you don't get a pay. I've always said that we should get more leave. I've always been advocating for that people that work in dementia should get more leave. Because you get so stressed that you want to take days off. You need to take time off. And then you take a week here and a week there, and by the time your yearly holiday comes around, you've got no more leave left. You know, yeah. I was ready that night. I was ready. I was going to get him. Hey, I was like, I had to take myself out of it. I said to Ian's name was Ian. His name is Ian. I said to him, Ian, you phone that police now, after ambulance now. Then the stupid ambos came. And they're standing there next to him. Come on, sir, come sit here. And he's got the table and he's like pushing the table like this. And, you know, and I sat off a distance and I watched this lot. And he's like, come on, sir, come sit here. And you're like ready to pick up the table and smack it. Come on. Nothing. They can't get close to him. And they're just standing there. And I sat there and I watched him off a distance for about 10 minutes. And I thought, that's it. Already I was ready. Hey, I walked right up to him and I said to him, get up, stand up, come sit here. And he got and he sat down. And I just had enough. It was just, no, that's it. The next day I went to my doctor. I said to my doctor, you better give me that letter. Because if I go back there, I'm going to kill somebody. You know, I'm just ready for that. And you just have to watch yourself. But, you know, you can only take it that much. And only learning really about that, putting somebody at harm. But it's so hard to know where that line is.
I think you recognize it more as you work with it because your tolerance or your level of coping, you can pick up quicker once you've done a few.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Some are worse than others, and you
But,
know when it's going to push your buttons.
I think you get more experience.
I
with
think,
body language.
yes, we tend to be, what's the right word? We get more, I was just writing that about one student when I did her references now. We get a higher level of tolerance and higher level of, there's another word I'm trying to think about now. Yeah, like the coping, you know, being able to deal with things because of your life experience and what you've gone through.
You also
Um,
pick up on body language.
Is that a detriment to the actual workforce by people accepting to work for those in those conditions with that kind of pay?
Look, yes, I think it is. And I think also because it's generally accepted from us to take the blows,
Yeah.
where on the back of the ambulance it says tolerance will not be, violence will not be tolerated, where we cannot step back and say violence will not be tolerated. It's kind of expected. I say a nurse first have to die before this will change. A nurse has to be
Wow.
smacked, one blow, and fall on the floor and hit her head, and one punch kills.
Yeah, I was about to say, well,
Yes.
Say, when I did my mental health training, I did that not long ago. When they had the situation of, say, psychosis, someone going into psychosis, which is similar to kind of like a, you know, what I'm talking about. And we were told just if you cannot get them to calm, like if you feel a threat, like you said, ambulance straight away.
Yeah.
Call the ambulance, they have to take them to hospital.
But then you see the ambulance come and they do nothing. They won't do anything.
It's out of your hands, off your land.
But that's the thing. And then often the RNs won't call the ambulance because that person is in such a situation, they soiled or whatever. You know, it's a real issue. And that's what they did with him. They gave him some, no, not injections. They gave him some medication, but he would throw you even with the medications. Then he would be on certain medications like risperidone. And risperidone is a horrible drug. All risperidone does is it actually makes you feel sick. So, you know,
Especially in the high dose.
Yeah.
That is like,
you just feel, oh, it's horrible. They just feel like you want to throw up. Every time you stand up, you feel like you're just going to dizzy.
It's the kind of drug that, like, because they're giving it to kids now.
Yeah, oh, it's horrendous.
They have to wean them onto it. Doctors are giving a dose too high first
Too
go.
quickly.
And that's what happens. And then the side effects.
And then and if you go and read about it, it says not to give it to dementia people. And 90% of them are on risperidone. And all it does, my son had it. They give it to psychosis. So risperidone, my son kept saying to me, this stuff makes my brain melt. And he refused to take it. So the one day, my one friend's a doctor, so I was working night shift, and I thought, and I phoned her, I said, I'm really struggling to sleep. And she said to me, take one of Jonathan's tablets. So he had a Valdoxin, which was a sleeping tablet, and then, or not, it was it's a placebo tablet, and then he had the risperidone. So I took the risperidone. Yeah, I took the wrong one. So I slept very nicely. Yeah, I slept very nicely. When I woke up, I went to work, and I was at work. We started at 11 at night. I must have taken it about 5 in the evening. When I got to work at 11, 12 o'clock, every time I stand up, I feel like, you know, like when you have really low blood sugar
Head rush.
and a head rush and you feel nauseous. And I just had this big empty feeling in my tummy, like nauseous feeling. And I thought, this is awful. It's like a chemical restraint in the sense that it makes you feel so sick that you can't be violent. That's all it does. Yeah. So it's not even, you know, where if you take something like a Serapex. So Serapex will make you feel like you've had a glass of wine. So it will chill you. You know, it's not that effect of feeling sick.
What's that?
So other types of not psychosis drug, not psychotic really, but
sedation.
Anti-aggro.
Yeah, a bit more like a sedation, taking the edge off. You know, that's where marijuana is very
And I
helpful.
was reading up about risperidone actually a lot more thoroughly because anyway, and it did say that you cannot give children with ADHD and autism now they're giving that constant. That's their recommendation now for those kids to help them to have a calm and a focus. And I read that it's only temporary. You're not supposed to have your
Not
child
longer
have
than
it
3 months.
forever.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to have it. It's not meant to be, and it's because they don't tell you that though. They
No.
don't tell you, the doctors aren't telling you that.
Next
So
time your
I'd
doctor
say-
prescribe it, tell him like you take one first, and then you feel
Yeah,
how it
that's
feels, and then now let me
Yeah.
give that. You know, it's awful drug.
So it's
Really
not a
horrible
permanent
drug.
fix. It's not, and that was
Yeah.
the one thing I read that kind of alarm bells went off to me. Well, why are we doing it? Because at the end of the day, when they come off it, like say they could be worse. Who knows?
Yeah, it actually damages their brain
Yeah,
eventually. Yeah,
That's-
eventually they become
Would they
like
become immune to it?
lethargic and they slur
Would they
their
become immune
speech.
to the medication?
They do. Long-term use make them stupid. It makes you so. It makes you sick. It melts your
Yeah.
brain.
I was about to say that'll be
Yeah.
like burning a hole in your brain,
Yeah.
no different to a
Yeah,
drug.
that's what my son felt like it was doing. And they do, and I mean, they do say if you read about it, they don't give it to people with dementia.
Okay.
And they do, all the time.
They
But
do
then
too.
the fact that they're saying they don't, just they don't,
Yeah.
makes you think, well, why are we giving it to our children? You know what I mean? I just think that's.
It's because it's $6 a shot. That's
Yeah,
why.
it's cheap.
Because it costs $6 a
It's
packet,
cheap.
and you know it's
Very
cheap,
cheap.
and it's
Yeah.
who knows who's making money from it. They must
Yeah.
all have shares in it. I don't know.
Oh, that's-
So it is, yeah, no good.
Conspiracy culture right
Yeah.
now.
So it's really hard because it's again not within our scope of practice to say anything. So nobody will gonna, but and they quite often will say to you, you need to read the situation and get yourself out of a situation before things go wrong. But 90% of the time, some of these things are unpredictable. You cannot. The 1 minute I've taken an old boy, drenched, wet until walking into his room saying, come, let's go. And he says, yes, he goes with me. I said, come, let's go have a shower. He goes all the way into the bathroom with me. No problem. He lets me help him pull his pants down, sit him down on the toilet. All goes well that far. He's agreed. He's been fine. The minute I go down and sit on at his feet to take his shoes off, he smacks me one blow from up here. Wow. And I'm down there on the floor. There's no way out. I didn't see it come. My neck is like, oh, for 3 weeks, I'm like, oh, gone. It just comes like that. Not always predictable. If somebody has got wild eyes, then obviously he was like, okay, I better be careful. She's got wild eyes. Keep my distance. But they don't always. That's human beings. That's people. You can't always see it come. Do try to keep the door open if you do deal with somebody that is potentially going to be aggressive. But it's not so easy. And we're restrained by what we can do and how we can act. We are definitely restrained. We can, and quite often they think, well, let's put a man in this position. It's probably the worst thing you can do is put a man in with another man that's aggressive, because that man has already got the testosterone running around. You as a man, what's your reaction going to be if somebody smacks you? Like, I'm going to smack you.
Just because he's a man.
It's like fuel on the fire. I've seen that. I had a young.
The thing is that people who are mentally challenged can be restrained by the threat of somebody who's already smacked them.
But then if you get caught doing that, you're out the door.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Where a person that's,
But I've seen more success with a little Filipino woman this size walking in on an aggressive man. And they're like, oh, my little baby. And then they don't do anything, But I've seen also one man, he used to get fueled up because he watches these, I think it's on Channel 7 on a Friday night. They always have like, we say skopskieten doodslag. They have violent movies on a Friday night on Channel 7. Action movies. So if you leave the TV on Channel 7 when he goes to bed and he's lying in his bed and he's watching this action, yeah, by 11 o'clock he's ready to kick somebody, you know. And then when you walk in there, it's like, and I walked in there with one young man. He looked like a Viking. He was like a big boy, and he shaved his hair around and wearing a little ponytail. He was a funny character. And this client went for him, and he grabbed the client, and he was ready to get him back. Okay, and I had to step in and say to him, between the two of them, this is the care worker, just go. It's all right. I got it. And you know, yeah. But I used authority. I shout at them like a mum. If I raise my voice, and I can raise my voice in a way, don't do that, and then they're like, you know, and it does help. Numbers help too. That's the only way I think out, is to be 3 or 4 people working with the same person. They won't have the go if there's 3 of you standing in front of them. They
mom is in some with the younger kids, which she worked with children that were aggressive as well. She's been beaten. She had one. She got told by her boss, if they come after you, just run into the bathroom and lock yourself in the toilet. And call the police. And then the police takes forever to say it's like a common thing. So she's in the bathroom freaking out, like bashing the door in, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, like that's.
Yeah,
they won't pay you more than $20, but they're willing to bring 4 people in. That's $20.
No, they won't be. They won't be willing to do that. That's the thing.
Every time, no matter what happened, she'd be sent back out on her own.
That's the thing, because there's no ratios, you know. So if you got a client and you're lucky in the disability sector where you have one-on-one, because in disability the ratios are, you know, determined need by need. In aged care, we were 2 in a high care unit with 32 clients, and it was high care dementia. They're all walking aggressive men, and all of them are young onset dementia, from 70 up, you know, some of them younger than that. So it's, yeah, not pretty, hey. Yeah. So this is the end of this unit. So I am going to just pause this recording. So thank you guys.